still admitting a few people, but we'll go ahead. Hi, getting started here. Thank you for attending Leader Liars Pants on Fire. My name is Brent Anderson with the ODK staff. I'm serving as a session moderator, and that means I am looking at moderating on the chat box. We ask everyone to mute their microphones right now, and then because we're on speaker view, and Mark and I will be speaking a little bit, but as far as the questions and answers, we do that all through the chat function. So please do that, and I'll monitor that. At the end of the session, there will be evaluation, and we invite you to provide feedback by completing that. It's now my privilege to introduce our presenter, Dr. Mark Matheson. Dr. Matheson has an MBA from Harvard and a doctorate in organizational leadership from the University of Phoenix. His doctoral dissertation is titled Practices of Honesty in Business Leaders. From 2010 to 2019, Professor Matheson taught at BYU, Hawaii, and Southern Virginia University. Before his retirement, he's been a partner and senior analyst with 3 investment banks. He's also an adjunct professor for 4 years and guest lectured at 8 other universities. Before COVID, in the last 17 years when he's in Utah, he has served as a volunteer teacher serving the Utah State Prison. He has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Utah, and for more than 15 years, Dr. Matheson owned a successful stock investment business and is a chartered financial analyst. He's been featured and quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Business Week, Investors Business Daily, the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the International Herald Tribune, USA Today, and in many other publications. That's a lot. I now turn the time over to Dr. Mark Matheson for Leader Liars Pants on Fire.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Appreciate your help. And we're going to start off by watching a little video here from a film clip by Jim Carrey. So we'll see if this can work for us. Okay. No.
No.
Bonjour.
Carl, I know it's you.
Oh, hey man. I was just about to call you. That's so weird. Had your number dial, was about to press send. Did you block your number?
Yeah, I did. You never answer when I don't. So, what are you doing?
Oh, just hanging out in my apartment.
You did get my text, right?
What? Text? What?
We're all going out tonight.
Oh man, that sounds great. I wish I could join you. I'm just so jammed up. I'm totally off the grid, you know what I mean?
No I don't. At all.
I got a bunch of stuff going on. There's this thing I gotta do. Any other night would have been great. Darn it to heck!
Thing? What thing?
Thing, you know, just a thing. If I had my thing in front of me, I could tell you what it is, but I know there's a thing.
A thing? Huh. You know, I don't think there's anything written down in your fake calendar.
No, it says specific things.
Specific things? Like, get in line at the video store?
What? What are you talking about? I'm not at the video store. I'm in my apartment.
I can see you, Carl. I'm outside the video store.
That's not me.
It's not?
Oh, I know what's happening. There is this guy who looks just like me who goes a lot of the same video stores that I do. That's probably who you're seeing right now.
Wow, that's amazing. Because his mouth is moving in exact sync with what you're saying. Carl, I know you're not saying anything. Carl, get outside. I know you're not talking.
What?
Carl!
All right. No.
And hopefully we're back. Did you notice how much deception played a part in that short video clip? It was only about 1.5 minutes, but I think I counted 13 different lies that Jim Carrey told. And, you know, if you think about it, a lot of our sitcom humor on our television shows revolves around deception. And it makes me think, is lying and deception just a part of our daily lives? And I'm assuming if you join the seminar today, you probably want to be more honest. We can't help people that don't want to be honest. They're going to do what they want anyway. But for those of us who are dishonest, often unknowingly, we can develop some better honesty skills. So today, I'd like to present 5 basic principles that I uncovered in my research, sort of foundation. Then there were 2 huge honesty traits that we developed, that I researched. And then there were 3 honesty skills, and each one of them had 4 smaller sub-skills that can help us improve our honesty. Now, I'm not trying to hold myself out as the epitome of honesty. I'm just a very interested observer in it and its effects on our lives. The ideas from today's seminar come from my doctoral research. I studied the characteristics of extremely honest leaders, and to give you, the best in under an hour of what I took a couple of years to research is going to be really tough. So we're going to move very fast. If you want to discuss anything with me offline, find me on LinkedIn or email me. My email is drmarkmath@gmail.com, drmarkmath@gmail.com, or LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk offline with you about any specific things that don't pertain maybe to the whole group. I'm really happy. As I started researching honesty, I realized that one of my heroes in reading his biography, when he was at boot camp in World War I on the firing range practicing their marksmanship, they called a ceasefire and they're out checking the targets, and his gun went off. And the grizzly drill sergeant went ballistic, and my hero remained silent. He didn't fess up that he'd been the one that had fired the shot. So if he had some early lapses, that gives me hope that I can maybe do some better things in my honesty struggles. Also, I remember about 40 years ago, I read a study that was reported by Lynn Scoresby about high school seniors. And they were asked this question: there's a boatload of cocaine anchored off Miami. If all you had to do was to drive it in and dock it, and you would be paid $1 million, would you do it? 95% of the high school seniors said yes, and my heart sort of ached. But that was 40 years ago. So now, 40 years later, I don't think honesty has gotten any better. We recognize all, I think, that society makes a big deal about honesty as being a real important value, but there's a large gap in the actual practice of it. And so I hope today in our seminar, you will be able to narrow the gap in your personal leadership as well. I'm going to offer some characteristics and some traits and some practices that we can start applying today. Okay. In my research, one leader said, it's a false presumption for any of us to assume that on our own, absent any reinforcement or support, that will necessarily be honest. Another leader noted, it's easy to think that you're an honest person, but habitually shade things or deceive people. So in our general leadership and problem solving abilities, that just isn't enough to be an honest leader, especially when we're faced with really multifaceted dishonesty situations that are calling for some immediate reactions. So I think honesty skills need to be developed and applied so people can respond honestly and not fall back on deceitful habits. I think part of the reason we got these challenges today so much is that we have stopped training children in honesty, and that's one trend I think we should reverse. One of the key points I'd like to bring up is that being honesty entails both the desire and the skill to carry out that desire. We believe that most people have good intentions, but the minority who want to use deception and deceit are still going to have to to behave dishonestly no matter what we do. I'd like to characterize a little bit a distinction between those of us who lie once in a while and a liar. If someone calls you a liar, I think they're saying that you constantly fall back on lying as a way of dealing with people, versus almost all of us lie a little bit from time to time. So in my research, I found 5 basic preliminary practices in improving the honesty. The first one here was perceiving that dishonesty is a threat to the well-being of your organization and to yourself and your personal life. One leader said, everyone faces the consequences of people above them in leadership that are dishonest. So it can be above us or below us or all around us. He went on to say, I believe that economically, emotionally, spiritually, all of us are being impacted in a huge way by dishonesty. Another leader said, quote, I'd say that the plague of our generation right now is folks trying to deceive one another, tell a half-truth, or don't tell all the truth, unquote. So you might ask, aren't we just naturally honest? And I don't believe so. This leads me to my second point, that we need to seek to understand why we maybe have some dishonesty in our roots. To win the battle for dishonesty, we can't ignore it. Dishonesty follows the natural rule of entropy. Things just go downhill if not controlled or improved. One leader observed a natural propensity for dishonesty versus a need to teach and train honesty skills. Quote, I've never had to teach my kids how to lie. I never had to teach them how to steal. I've never had to teach them to do dishonest things. But as a parent, I've had to teach them to tell the truth, unquote. In my life, I've seen an impact from dishonesty. I was a financial backer of one venture that was breaking ground in its field. The business plan was impressive. The profit projections looked great. The first products appeared to be on target, but the company never just seemed to get in a groove. Something was wrong. I could sense it. Many times I asked the CEO, eyeball to eyeball. I said, is there anything wrong? Is everything okay? And he'd always dismiss it. And he said everything was fine. Well, I sensed something was amiss, but I never could put my finger on it. After the company collapsed, I learned that this CEO had been lying to everyone. The long nights at the office were spent on questionable websites, and the results have been doctored to make up for some errant behavior. So I think we need to analyze our current situation. And here are 2 practices that I think you can do now to analyze your level of honesty. First, conduct an honesty inventory for a day or a week or however long you remember to do it. Keep a pad or a notebook handy and see how many honesty situations you run across in your daily life, and see how many times you're tempted to lie. And second, do in a quiet time, maybe do an honesty assessment, reflect on your past life, and see perhaps where you cut some corners and where honesty maybe impacted some of your past relationships. So after you've done those 2 introspections, I think that will lead you naturally to the third basic principle, that you have to develop a personal commitment to honesty. You have to really want to do it. We can't for long separate our personal honesty and our leadership honesty. Honesty ends up being at the hub of everything we do, every question you answer, every action you have. So here are some self-evaluation questions for you to consider. Ask yourself, is honesty a priority for me or only when I get caught? Is honesty a proactive core trait that I employ and conduct in my personal life, or is dishonesty the default mode that I use? And are we usually honest mainly when it is not inconvenient? When it's convenient, we'll slip in a little lot. So those are some self-examination questions to think about. I believe that honesty, like any other thing, like being a scholar or an athlete or a pianist, it takes practice of honesty skills to make it a natural part of your leadership. which leads me to the fourth basic premise, that we can then develop a vision of honesty for our leadership. To have an effective leadership, we have to develop strong relationships with our followers. A relationship is based on trust, and trust is upheld through honesty. Dallin Oaks, a former justice, set a lofty benchmark of consistent honesty, stating, quote, "If a person cannot be relied upon to tell the truth, not just usually, but invariably, you can never have a wholly satisfying relationship with that person, whether an employee, employer, spouse, friend, or partner." One of my research subjects observed, "We desperately need honest leaders in this country, in this world. That's probably the single biggest factor contributing to all the problems we've had in the past decade, in my mind. I think we are all suffering as a society from the negative impact of a lack of honesty in leadership at almost every level of society," unquote. And let me give an example of how one CEO successfully changed his honesty style. Let's call him Jacob. He began to ask honesty questions after he took over the reins of his family business. He found himself facing a dealer who was playing pricing games with their product line. This dealer accounted for about 10% of their overall revenues, but Jacob didn't think it was fair that this one dealer was not being honest. Jacob made the hard decision to terminate the selling relationship with this dealer. The result was that the other dealers appreciated this bold move. And the next year, those grateful other dealers made up the sales deficit caused by the loss of this one large dealer. Jacob's company was prepared to sacrifice a good chunk of revenues one year to put a stop to some dishonesty, and they ended up being rewarded quite quickly. It doesn't always happen so fast. Since that experience, Jacob has installed a radical company-wide values program. Quote, "Since the values adoption, we have doubled sales and more than doubled operating income." So that was quite a dramatic example that stood out to me that I wanted to share with you. The last of the 5 basic principles about honesty is that we need to thus trust in positive outcomes of honest behavior. If you don't believe that honesty will benefit you, you won't do it. So you have to believe that honesty is the best long-term course of action, and you have to believe that honesty in the long run will benefit you. It doesn't always do that in the short run. Sometimes dishonesty pays off in the short run, but honesty pays off in the long run. And our honesty skills need to be tested over time and under stress. If we're never have our skills tested and we're never in any stressful environments, it's easy to be honest. It's when we get into tight situations that we determine whether we really are going to be honest or not. Let me give you an example that really shows that under stress. A friend of mine, his ancestors were in the Netherlands during World War II, and they lived in Amsterdam, in the big city, and they would make some products somehow and go out into the rural areas of Holland to trade for scarce commodities during the war, like butter and eggs and cream. And so one day his grandmother went out on her bicycle, like you see in the Wizard of Oz with the basket on the front of the bike. And she went out and bartered for butter and eggs and was coming back into the city and was stopped by a checkpoint. And the soldier at the checkpoint said, what do you have? What are you doing here? What's in the basket? And she just said, am I going to be honest or not? And she said, oh, there are eggs and butter in the basket. The soldier didn't believe her, laughed at her reply, and waved her on without ever looking in the basket. So that's a good example of being honest under stress. And I really researched that a lot. And what did I discover? How we can be more honest? here were the two main things I found out. Things you all know: sacrifice and humility. The first one, if you are willing to sacrifice to uphold your honesty, if you admit mistakes, even when it costs something to do it, that's the key thing. You have to be prepared to walk away from profitable, but perhaps dishonest dealings. Here's an example of that. One senior vice president I interviewed, he had just this extraordinary example. He had been tasked by his company to sell a building that they weren't using any longer. It was a privately held company, and that had this building on the market for a long time with no one interested in it. The best offer they had was finally a guy came in and offered them $500,000 for the building. They shook hands on it, and that was the best offer they got. But they were under the gun to sell the building. And then, within the next week, someone comes in and offers them $1 million for the same building. He said, I went to the owners and told them about the situation. They asked me, you offered your hand, right? And you shook hands with them on $500,000? Yeah. Well, sell the building for $500,000. That story just blew me away. I asked myself, could I give up $500,000 on a deal to maintain my honesty? That just really drove home the point. So a second core trait of honesty is embracing humility as a guard against dishonesty. My research found that much dishonesty stems from attempts to limit damage to our ego. Let me repeat that. I think it's so crucial. Much dishonesty stems from attempts to limit damage to our ego. And then we can improve this in a couple easy ways. I think you can accept feedback from others, and you can acknowledge the error. Honest individuals have the courage to admit their mistakes instead of lying to cover them up. One honest leader said, quote, I've had to go back and retrace my steps and say, I need to correct this, unquote. So you need to be prepared, as the saying goes, to lose face for a bit when you catch yourself wanting to lie. It'll be real tempting to save embarrassment and short-term punishment by lying. But one leader said, quote, we're supposed to have all the answers, and we're not supposed to admit we're wrong. And I was raised in a family where I never heard my father say he was wrong. But I've just practiced, he said, stepping up to the plate and saying I was wrong, close quote. So it's an evolution from a prideful exchange to more open communication. So use these words and the actions that they reflect. Remember the words, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, I'll try not to repeat it. I'm sorry, I'm wrong, I'll try not to repeat it. So let's review the 5 preliminary steps that I found out. Perceiving honesty as a threat to your leadership, understanding why you've been dishonest in the past, coming up with a stronger desire to be honest in the future, having a positive vision that that's the right track to go on, and believing that it will pay off for you. And then those 2 biggies, sacrifice and humility. If you don't remember anything else from today's seminar, I hope you remember the emphasis on sacrifice and humility. They are so crucial. I found that mastering those 2 selfless actions takes away the main motivators to be dishonest. If you're not worried about your ego and you're not worried about, losing a few dollars, then you can very much more easily be honest. So now, in the second half of our seminar today, I'd like to move into some more advanced skills. I put them all with nice verbs that all start with E. Exemplify, enable, and encourage. So the first one was exemplify honesty. Can you be an honesty hero? At your funeral, will anyone mention how honest you are? I think that's a good thing to think about. Will that be one of your prime characteristics that people say you are? Enable honesty. Take down the barriers that keep honesty from thriving. And finally, encourage honesty. turn around any dishonest practices. So under Exemplify, here are 4 specific skills. The first one, practice self-reminders. What does this mean? Imagine that, you're in a situation, you're feeling a little uneasy about it. You tell yourself, I'm unclear of what to do. I'm unsure of the rules that might apply in this situation. It just doesn't feel right. I better discuss it with someone. So use some personalized mental or written checklists to help evaluate your honesty dilemmas. I recommend this one book, The Business Ethics Field Guide. The authors subdivide all the ethical dilemmas they have collected over many years of teaching and combine them into 13 understandable categories. So here's some examples of some self-reminder questions. Ask yourself, what is the other person thinking about this situation? Am I doing things that I think are honest, but that the other person will perceive as being dishonest? The prototypical example of this has been called the Washington Post test. How will I feel if a reporter is watching me proceed along this path and what I'm saying, and what if it ends up on the evening news? So you want to cross-check an honesty dilemma you're facing with your established set of values. Also, you can have an honesty motto or a mining phrase to keep you on track. Maybe remember an incident from your past that you can use as an honesty mental touchstone. Share this reminder word with your spouse, your colleagues, your friends, or your family. I like how one person named Richard Edgley employed 2 of his customized honesty touchstones. They were 3 towels and a 25-cent newspaper. So 3 towels referred to when he was in college and working at Jackson Hole Lodge during the summer. Those days he wasn't paid very much, and he thought he was entitled to take home 3 souvenir towels from the Jackson Hole Lodge. And he brings them home in his car. His father sees them and helps him to think more honestly, and he turned around and drove back to the lodge and gave the towels back. So he uses 3 towels to remind him to be honest. Another time when he was older and involved in big business, he was walking through the airport with an entourage of business people surrounding the head honcho. And the head honcho went to one of those newspaper stands that you used to see, put in 25 cents for one newspaper, and held the door open, and then passed out newspapers to everyone else at the entourage. And Edgley says he didn't take a newspaper. He said, my integrity, my honesty is worth more than 25 cents that the CEO was giving out the papers for free for. So he uses those 2 honesty stories as touchstones, as reminders for him to stay honest. Listen now to a leader who had used honesty scandals as motivation. Quote, I'm not going to turn out like these people. I'm not going to let these little compromises ruin my life because my reputation means more than whatever amount of money I'm gaining. I won't have a clear conscience. I don't want to have any secrets. I want a life that is above reproach. I don't want to be the next headline story. So that's really motivating for me. He goes on, I'm trying to give our guys enough information to say, this could be me. And so they will then set up safeguards and structures. I saw too many people I loved, admired, respected, caught up in lies, dishonest acts, and I want to make sure I don't end up being the next casualty, close quote. So the second skill under Exemplify is guard against rationalizing. I like to remind myself of the famous reminders that encourage wrongdoers to rationalize their dishonesty. These are 3. First one, no one will ever know. Just once won't hurt, and everybody else is doing it. Now I suggest the inverse of those 3. You whisper to yourself when you're in a tight spot and you say, I and maybe everyone will know just once might actually sink me, and everybody else isn't doing it. So we need to be so aware of our self-justification mechanisms. Here's how I first saw that in my life. When I was in 7th grade, we had a report on a wildlife project, and we had to include visual aids. And my junior high library had a great article in National Geographic about the bird, the osprey. But the school didn't have any copy machines, and I needed to have visual aids for my report. So I ripped out the pages of the school's copy of the National Geographic. Well, I got caught. And so now I use the word osprey as one of my touchstones. Justice Oakes remind us that honesty is like a bucket. Visualize that. Honesty is like a bucket. If there's even a small hole in that bucket and you leave it overnight, it has stopped being able to perform its proper function of holding liquid. You'll wake up in the morning and there won't be any liquid in that bucket, even if it had a small hole. So the big question is often follows, if someone is doing some amount of lying, how do you know they won't lie to you? So here's a rationalizing safeguard I like. Let those in authority or your friend or a key player make the decision for you after you inform them of all the necessary information. So let's walk through a scenario about that. While you're shopping in a store, you see a shirt you like. You find your size, and you can tell from the tag that a sales price sticker used to be there, but you don't see any sales sign now on the shelf. You look around at the other sizes and you see more shirts in different sizes still have the sales sticker on them that lower the price from $28 to $20. You pull the sticker off from another shirt and put it on the shirt size you need. What could you do? If you have a response you'd like to share, please post that in the chat. But I think the example that I've worked through my mind about this one is I would take both shirts, one with the right tag and the shirt I want without the tag, and I would take them both up to the clerk and present the information to the clerk or the manager and see what they do. And it's been my experience that most retail establishments are very willing to help the customer. And if there's been a mistake on the pricing, they'll give you a lower price. But that's a good example of not just switching the tags yourself, but doing it and letting the person in charge of the store make the decision, not you.
Mark, they had 3 people respond with that exact same answer. So looks like that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think that instead of the burden being on us, we take the information to our boss or the key players that are involved, lay out the information, and let them decide. So the next one, exemplify, the third skill is to recognize our own little lies. So we ask ourselves, how do I draw the lines or boundaries between little lies and medium-sized lies and big, worse lies? I think you'll find it's pretty difficult to draw some boundaries. As you know, you've heard your whole life, little lies can lead to bigger compromises. Do you remember the old story about the guy making a bargain with the devil for $1 million? And then the devil changes the dollar amount he promised to give him by saying, we determined you're willing to be a liar. Now we're just haggling over the price. A willingness to lie, even about little things, immediately calls into question your overall character and credibility. When we see little lies in others, there's a natural progression in our thinking. We think, if he's lying about that, then he's probably willing to lie about other things. And you can see that's a pretty slippery slope. So let's look at the fourth step to exemplify honesty. This is a really crucial one. Rehearse honest responses in advance. This is one skill I hope you will remember and employ. A big part of exemplifying honesty is to develop personal honesty communication skills. Take a moment right now and ask yourself, what are some situations that cause me stress when I might be tempted to fudge the truth? For those of you in management, the perfect example of this is in giving the annual employee evaluation. You want to be honest, but when you are face to face with that employee, you want to avoid a messy emotional situation. You don't want the other person crying and upset and defensive. So you are tempted to shade reality. You don't tell the employee your honest evaluation. Now, for those situations, what can you do better? You can prepare honest responses. Identify issues in advance where you can have a very objective, evidence-based response. If you need to, even map out your future honesty dilemmas. Think, where will you face some honesty problems in the next year? And right now, script them if necessary, how you will respond if and when those honesty situations arise in your leadership. That way, you're always going to make the decision up front based on rational, non-stressful, non-emotional decisions. And then you can be exact when you're talking to people, and that will help you gain credibility. Now, remember, honesty doesn't have to be brutal, direct, brash. You know, that's not adjectives that have to be part of honesty. You can create the best environment, context, and content for how you want to say your honest messages. So let's take an example. Let's say there's an addiction situation and you have to script out in advance how to say to your significant other that you've slipped up again. Or in that highly emotional situation, I guarantee you, you'll be tempted to be dishonest and you'll rationalize and you'll say it not to protect yourself, but you'll say, I'm protecting the other person. And so that's why you want to have maybe that scripted situation laid out in front. Now, if you're like me, I don't like confrontation. So doing this can help you not revert to lying to avoid emotional messiness. You know, I hate messy emotions. And so scripting and practicing honest responses will help you avoid that emotional messiness where you'll be tempted to lie. And when you do it in advance, you can search for phrasing that is honest and that can accomplish the same humane result that your lies are trying to achieve. And sometimes your best response is just going to be silence. Be quiet. Don't mislead. Maybe just reply, I can't say. So plan for what inappropriate or sensitive issues might come up. So here's an example for those of you that have some children. If your teenager asks, Dad, did you ever get in trouble as a teenager? You think, uh-oh, what am I going to say? Am I going to admit to all the things I got in trouble with and set a bad example for your child? You have thought about that in advance and you respond, yes. Why do you ask? Yes. Why do you ask? And you turn the question back over to them and you can avoid lying about how you did some things while you were a youth. I think we all have heard of the classic example of an inept lie in response to a delicate question when many years ago the president was asked about marijuana smoking and they said, I didn't inhale. I don't think any of us believed that answer, but that was the lie that they gave. So putting this all together, think about this scenario. And this happened to me. Mother-in-law bought all the married kids cheap t-shirts on a family vacation. I wasn't going to wear it. I thought this was a waste of money. It was frivolous, stupid, it was just a cheap t-shirt. And then Mother-in-law asks, how did you like the t-shirt? Should you conceal how you really feel about the gift? So maybe make a comment in the chat about that. What can you say that will be honest and still show love towards your mother-in-law? See, that was the trade-off, love versus honesty. And I tried to, in later years, think about how I could have responded better, because the first time in the stressful situation when I hadn't thought about it in advance, I didn't do so well. So let's summarize the 4 skills we've talked about with Exemplify. Practice self-reminders, guard against rationalizing, recognize your own little lies, and then that crucial last one, rehearse some honest responses. And, you know, I know this whole situation is not clear cut. So let's look at an example now, a scenario that isn't very clear cut. You discover after you've been to the store the next day that you were undercharged for a shower curtain. And you want to be honest, you want to give back the $5 that they didn't charge you. So you go back to the store, you have to wait in a long line at customer service. The clerk is not at all, strangely, grateful that you've come back. In fact, she acts like you're almost criminal as she notes the fact that you really owe $5.34 with sales tax. And then she directs you to a long cashier's line to stand in to pay the money. It hasn't been convenient for you to be honest. Are you justified to think to yourself, if they can't make it easy for me to be honest and be nice about it, that I'm doing the right thing, do I need to? Can you see how honesty is not so cut and dried? So let's move on to from exemplify honesty to enable honesty. And I'll run through these fairly quickly. So first of all, you can avoid presumptive honesty. And this can especially happen when you hire someone and you just assume that they're going to be honest, and you don't do any checking, and you don't do any follow-up, and you don't do any observation. So don't naively assume that they're automatically going to be honest. Gather evidence before you make any conclusions for their honesty. Number 2, use some one-on-one interaction. Get them talking privately. Utilize some deeper conversation between you. If people know that you're going to be talking to them, not just about superficial things, at maybe some set intervals, they may be less inclined to hide their dishonesty. Fear of discovery is a very crude but important barrier to dishonesty. If we know we're going to be found out, that often keeps people in line. And number 3, do not abandon rules and honesty enforcement. You know, if you're honest, just don't assume the whole world is going to be. You have to have the honesty side and the reinforcement side. Put in place controls to guide honest actions. And let's use an example from the family. In a family setting, you can't have an unrealistic one-sided curfew that you'll know will be hard for the child to keep. You know, so you can't have a rule that you know no one is going to be able to follow. That just sets everybody up for dishonesty. The old proverb is trust in Allah, but tie up your camel. Number 4, disable economic motivators for dishonesty. This is one you can really have some control over. Honesty seekers have discipline in their dealings with money. They have short-circuited the need for power and money in their life that prompts them or tempts them to be dishonest. So if you can seek for a stable economic life in your own personal situation, you won't be so tempted to be dishonest. I've often told my students, have a slush fund, a rainy day fund, walking money, whatever you want to call it. So when your boss puts you in a situation that you don't want to accept and do the unethical thing or the dishonest thing, you can say, this isn't for me. And you're not so strung out that you don't have any money to pay rent and you don't have any money to feed your kids. but you have a reserve that gives you a cushion to maintain your honesty. So setting and sticking to some budget guidelines might help you guard against the temptation to be honest. I watched a British TV show in the last month where the financial advisor was signing up a new client, an old man in a trailer that, you know, he could be taken advantage of. And when the old man gave him a check, the financial advisor said, "No, don't put anything in the pay line. We have a stamp where we'll stamp the name of our company on the pay line." Well, you could see what was going to happen. He took the payee line and put his own name in, put it in his personal account, because a few scenes before we'd seen how his spouse was on his case, that they had no money, the kids didn't have money for shoes or clothes, and you could see that this financial advisor was so strung out and on the edge that when he had the chance to be dishonest, he took it. And you know how that turned out. So eliminate disincentives to do the wrong thing, okay? Eliminate disincentives to do the wrong thing. Here's a great example again from the family. If you have a 13-year-old, for example, and they have no way to earn money, they don't have a job, they don't have an allowance, what are they going to do when they want that CD or something? They're going to shoplift it. They're going to be dishonest if they have no other way to get any money. So just think about that and apply that to your general condition to eliminate any disincentives to stay honest. So here are the 4 sub-skills under enable honesty again. Avoid presumptive honesty. Set up some rules and some boundaries. Do some constant interaction with people to help them know that you'll be asking these questions, and eliminate the economic motivators for dishonesty. So now the third point, encourage honesty. We've talked about exemplify and enable honesty, and the final facilitator of honesty is to encourage honesty, and we have 4 specific skills under these. The first one is share information in openness and transparency. Share as much about the bad news as we do about the good news. We have a natural tendency to want to share the good stuff, and we want to hide the bad stuff. But if we make it a practice to be transparent and open about all the stuff, then we won't try to hide and lie about things. So bidirectional communication about things, good or bad, really helps out. One leader said, "I try to be real and realistic in what could happen." He said, "I tell them I can deal with the truth, but I can't deal with lies. You want me to think if you can share like that with me, then I can trust him and he will listen to me." And here's another scenario to think about. You were under the impression when you took your new job that your parking was free at your level. The first day on the job, you find out, no, you have to pay $75 for your parking pass a month. And you think to your mind, you rationalize, hey, that's not fair, you know? Do you pad your expense account each month to make up for the $75 you really believe you're owed? So you can respond in the chat. Is there a way you could deal with that in openness and transparency? Can you deal with that situation where you feel you've been wronged with openness and transparency? The next point, understand what to disclose. Here's an important distinction. Honest communication does not necessarily mean full disclosure. You don't have to tell everyone everything. If they haven't earned the right to hear that information, maybe they don't deserve that. Okay, you don't have to tell everyone at every level every secret of your organization. Okay, that is not, full disclosure is not a part of honesty. Okay, So I suggest using what we've called in the past the golden rule. Think about what others would want to know, how they would want to be treated. One leader said, if I'm honest with people, I think they'll be honest with me. If I'm dishonest to people, they'll probably be dishonest to me, unquote. So what would that person want to know? What do they need to know? If I were in their shoes, what would I want to be told? So here's one last honesty scenario to ponder. You determined in doing your taxes that your employer withheld $320 too much from a check the prior year. Then you discover that they hadn't deducted $425 in health insurance premiums from another paycheck. Should you go through the hassle of explaining all of this to them, or just call it even? You can see there are so many situations that we need to think about and how we're going to respond. So the third encouragement point is reduce the fear of blowing the whistle. You know, what if you go out to the employee parking lot and you see a broken door or broken rear view mirror on the company car, and you go to the employee that had that car and said, that happened at the mall. but you find some glass on the floor of the company parking garage, so you know that that was a falsehood. They've got to feel like they can be open with you and discuss whatever it is without severe retribution. Establish a culture that honest, unintentional mistakes are okay. Hiding mistakes or covering up or lying about intentional actions is not acceptable. So here's a hierarchy. Help your followers to see this, that a mistake is just a level 3 issue. An intentional bad choice is a level 6, and then it goes ballistic when it's intentional, and then you cover up. That takes it all the way down to really serious. One leader said, tell them, you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes, unquote. Talk about it and how we can do better next time. Another leader said, when I mess up, I tell them I've messed up. I say, if you see me mess up, tell me. If you lie to me, I can't help you. I don't know what reality is. I can't direct us the way we need to go if I don't know what the truth is. So here's a caution. The organizational grapevine or rumor mill is real. I've seen that in my career. A failure to deal with one dishonest employee will usually become known pretty quickly to the rest of the organization. So be careful. When you lie to one person, everyone is going to know that you lied. So mastering this honesty skill includes transparency and some reinforcement and the rejection of defensiveness. You know, our natural tendency is to be defensive, though this will take some time to develop those skills. So use patience and self-discipline to not immediately attack their comments and criticism. You don't want to kill the messenger. Monitor your reactions and your responses. Your body language and even your tone of voice can show that we've already judged them. So learn when to challenge and when to support. You want your employees to tell you things. You want the practice to be, I'm not shooting the messenger, I'm shooting the message. How would you feel about an employee if one said something in the heat of the moment and then came back to you and corrected it and said, oops, I need to be more honest. I need to tell you something different. You would really like that employee. You'd be grateful that they were honest with you.
Dr. Matheson, we've got about 3 minutes and then it's going to cut us off. So you might be aware that it cuts you off in mid-sentence.
All right, good. We're almost done here. So our last one, under encouraging honesty, is to implement, and notice the adjective, external assessment and external personal accountability. My research found that third-party input is crucial guidance for setting honesty standards and reviewing conduct. We can deceive ourselves so easily. We need others to help us see more clearly. Get wise counsel from the people that care about you. Stop living a dual life, acting privately differently than you act in public. If you go research the people that have been involved in big scandals, I don't think you'll find many that had much accountability in their life. So let me share one final story here. I had a friend tell me that grew up in Hawaii about a memorial service for the founder of a large Hawaiian bank. A son related the story about his father and his grandfather. Grandfather had a small grocery store. There was talk in the town about an unknown newcomer to the community that no one knew much about and no one had got to know yet. So one day into the grandfather's store came this new resident of the community and proceeded to buy some provisions. The bill came to $9 and the customer gave grandfather a $10 bill. Grandfather gave the customer a $5 bill in change and the customer left. The son, having watched the whole transaction, immediately asked his father why he gave the man $5 instead of $1. Grandfather said that he was testing the man's character and now knew enough about him and wanted to know no more. That was a test that he ran. So thank you for being with us today. I hope you realize you must train yourself in honesty skills. They aren't going to come naturally. You have to go out and practice and seek to build them in your life. Thank you for coming to our seminar today. And as I said, I'm happy to talk to you offline. Get a hold of me on LinkedIn or at my email. Brent at ODK can get you my email if you don't remember, drmarkbath@gmail.com. Thank you again for coming today and enjoy the rest of the national conference.